23. And the incident that he's referencing is from February 2021 when Defense for Children Palestine published a report of a 15-year-old Palestinian boy where he described an Israeli interrogator raping him with an object while he was detained. Israel raided their facilities and declared them a terrorist organization. America dropped everything.
Mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believe they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual atrocities, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights.
This was very well known before October 7. And not only that, but those might remember, part of the reason why Leftovers ended was the disagreements that I had with Ethan Klein. And one of the things that I brought up in our conversation was exactly this. I told him something along the lines of, while sexual violence is commonplace in any sort of military action, at the time, this was right after October 7, we didn't have any direct evidence or firsthand victim accounts of any sexual violence taking place on October 7, whereas there was tremendous amounts of evidence of systematic sexual violence taking place in Israeli facilities against Palestinians. And if you recall at the time, a lot of people got very mad at me. There was an entire group that was actively trying to claim that the Israelis were too racist to rape the Palestinians. Sex Pestinese community did that, as though sexual violence has anything to do with, attraction. Anyway, this is fairly commonplace and also certainly well known. So when Christoph came out with this report, it wasn't all that unique. Where he came out with this report is, however, it's unique because New York Times, as I said earlier in the day on Twitter, is actually more pro-Israel. The New York Times editorial board, in its coverage, in its defense of Israel, is unironically more pro-Israel than Haaretz is.
Palestinian Authority official
who says he was with two other Palestinians trying to protect a Bedouin village under attack from settlers. When the settlers seized them, stripped them, beat them, and he says one tried to rape him with a stick. And he actually has some evidence of this interaction with the settlers in the form of a photo that the settlers posted to social media.
One woman, 23 at the time of her detention, told me that she was regularly stripped naked, forcibly bent over, and groped all over her body by male and female guards. One journalist said he had been held down and raped by a dog, a claim backed by other accounts from prisoners who report they underwent the same thing. I'm appalled by this pattern of abuse, partly because our American tax dollars subsidize the Israeli security forces. I fear that leaves us complicit. The United States has leverage, and we could use it to insist on an end to the impunity and to demand that Red Cross visits be restored for Palestinian detainees. Look, whether you consider yourself pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian, here's one thing we should be able to agree on. We're anti-rape. The horrific abuse inflicted on Israeli women on October 7th now happens to Palestinians day after day after day.
Now.
When Israel was attacked on October 7th.
Buddy, now. Anyway, it's crazy. Yeah, where was this New York Times a year ago? I'm confused as to why New York Times is now switching up. On the one hand, I'm annoyed that it took so long for the New York Times to write something like this. On the other hand, Nick Kristof is getting his ass beat on the timeline nonstop, and so is the New York Times. I totally understand why a lot of people have presented the New York Times as public enemy number one. It makes total sense. Some of the pro-Palestinian crowd believe that this is the New York Times reputation laundering to make themselves seem as a more credible institution once again. Yeah. You've been talking about this and people disbelieved you.
I mean, listen, that's a huge claim.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to relitigate this shit. Now the Israeli government is suing the New York Times.
Op-ed on Israeli sexual violence against Palestinians is getting a lot of attention online. In the column, American journalist Nicholas Kristof calls out Israel's use of rape and sexual violence against Palestinians. He goes on to detail harrowing stories that he heard from 14 Palestinian victims who were assaulted by Israeli soldiers, settlers, security agents, and prison guards. But none of this is new. Israel's systematic use of rape and sexual violence against Palestinians, including children, has been widely reported by international rights groups and media, and it is often a subject of debate.
להכניס מקל לרקטום של בן אדם, זה לגיטימי?
כן, אם הוא נוח'בה, הכל לגיטימי לעשות.
Yep, that was an emergency Knesset meeting that they conducted after the Israeli prosecutors detained 6 Israeli concentration camp officers from Sde Taiman, and this Israeli politician said, yes, you can anally rape Palestinians as long as they're Nukba. They're all Nukba. They're all Hamas's special forces, and therefore rape is legitimate. After this emergency Knesset meeting, the Israeli society's most far-right elements did a January 6th style riot outside of the facility where these guys were being held, the 6 rapists. They were able to free them. It was a successful January 6th style pro-rape riot. One of the main rapists was brought on television, Israeli television. He had a balaclava on. For the week leading up to this event, he always would refuse to identify himself. He came on television, and it was a big moment where he took his balaclava off and became a television star. He was praised as a hero. Everything I'm telling you sounds insane. Because it is insane. But none of it is a lie. The Israeli prosecution dropped that case a couple months ago. Benjamin Netanyahu personally had the 6 rapists on a press run where he openly apologized to them for even having to go through prosecution. Hundreds power warrior Meir Ben Shitrit is his name, who was investigated on suspicion of rape no less, arrives this evening to open up everything about the Sde Taiman affair.
מתמודד עם הנוח'בות בשדה תימן, ועכשיו מתמודד עם האשמות קשות, וכולנו רוצים לשמוע מה יש לו להגיד.
There is CCTV footage of Israeli occupation forces raping Palestinian prisoners. There are instances where Israeli concentration camp guards go on Israeli television and openly celebrate how they train their dogs even. None of this is a secret. And for the last couple of days since this article was published, the Zionists have been losing their minds on the internet, claiming this is blood libel, claiming this is unacceptable, claiming Israeli it's a lie. Let's take a look at Prem also breaking the story down.
Military is dropping charges against 5 soldiers who were caught on camera raping a Palestinian detainee. Sounds horrifying, right? The whole story is even worse. So nearly 2 years ago, Israeli police detained soldiers suspected of sexually abusing a Palestinian at this notoriously brutal prison camp called Sde Taiman. In response, mobs of Israeli rioters and lawmakers stormed a military base and a military court in support of the soldiers. In the months that followed, the soldiers were welcomed to court with chants of, "You are heroes." And
for the record, if you were in here, you saw all of this happen in real time because I covered it in real time. But a question I have for you is this. If you're new here, doesn't that shock you that this information, you didn't hear about it at all? If you weren't watching me back then, you probably didn't hear about the story at all. Isn't that insane?
And we love you. Some were even welcomed on national TV. Meanwhile, top Israeli officials were seeking to both defend the soldiers and instead punish Yifat Tomer Yerushalmi, the ex-military advocate general who leaked the footage of the rape. She resigned after admitting that she leaked the footage, and the Israeli government went after her, detaining her and investigating her, and at one point even putting her under house arrest. Her case is still open, while the case into the alleged rapist soldiers themselves is now closed. It's important to underscore that this case in particular was pointed to by US officials and other pro-Israel defenders as proof that the government of Israel could be trusted to investigate itself. And now, the case is closed and the charges are dropped. All the while, top officials like Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz call it blood libel to investigate soldiers caught on camera raping a Palestinian. Katz even openly said that the role of the Israeli military's legal system is to protect and safeguard soldiers, and not to, for example, hold them accountable when they commit a crime on camera. As the US and Israel open up their war on Iran, it might be even harder for them to rally public support or claim some sort of moral cause when one government is led by the Epstein class and the other is led by officials who have now just defended rapist soldiers.
Yes, I thought Netanyahu's statement was very revealing in one way. When he announced today that he was directing his aides to consider a lawsuit, he said, "We will fight these lies in the court of public opinion and in the court of law." Now, maybe it's just a coincidence, but he listed court of public opinion first. And to me, this legal threat is largely about telling people in the court of public opinion, telling Israelis, telling folks all around the world that the country rejects these allegations, refutes what was...
Yeah. How much more manipulation? How much more? My dog took care of some Nukbas in Sde Teiman. Judeo-Nazi settler soldier Elkanah Fetterman, this is from BN, was on Channel 14's Hapatruya team tonight and brought his gun and dog with him, the same dog you can see in the quoted tweet. I hate to think what he'd done to poor abductees at Sde Teiman. Netanyahu released a statement, by the way. Today, I instructed my legal advisor to consider the harshest legal action against the New York Times and Nicholas Kristof. They defamed the soldiers of Israel and perpetuated a blood libel about rape, trying to create a false symmetry between the genocidal terrorists of Hamas and Israel's valiant soldiers. I like that the blood libel is that there is a false symmetry. Buddy, Israel in its totality have done infinitely worse than October 7. Israel, as a matter of fact, the Israeli occupying forces, as a matter of fact, have done thousands of October 7s to the Palestinian population. There is no symmetry. What the are you talking about? We will fight these lies in the court of public opinion and the court of law. So yeah, they're trying to sue the New York Times, which, by the way, it's not going to happen. I mean, they could try, but that discovery process would literally destroy Israel.
Discussion on television. And even comedy material.
סיפור אחי שהתעללנו ברקטום של פעיל חמאס. זה הסיפור. וצלצלו? מי ענה?
ואתה הבחור עם האייפון שהכניס לו לישבן הנוח'בה וכולם היית מעורב באירוע הזה?
This time, however, it was reported by the New York Times, America's paper of record that has time and again overlooked and cast doubt on Palestinian narratives. Israel was quick to react. Official Israeli accounts and pro-Israeli figures slammed the piece, flooding social media feeds with criticism of the article, its author, and the publication. Israel's foreign ministry accused Kristof of blood libel, of inversing reality and spreading baseless lies. Israel's ambassador to the US, Michael Leiter, also accused Kristof of lying.
And by the way, this isn't the first time the New York Times has disproportionately bashed Israel. Oh, it's an addiction. This is characteristic of the same paper that disseminated baseless accusations of starvation.
While Israel denies accusations of sexual violence against Palestinian prisoners, the government has not allowed the Red Cross to inspect the conditions.
Bro, they're a Nazi country. I don't know what else we can say about this. They're a fucking Nazi country. They don't think the Palestinians are human beings. So from their perspective, it's like perfectly valid to rape them. Sometimes rape them to death. I'm not like, it's just what it is. The entire ideology, the ideological framework which Zionism operates off of is the exact same fascist ideological framework, the ethno-supremacist ideological framework that Nazism operated off of. It's just the truth. And for some weird reason, most people see this reality now, but Israel still thinks it can get away with defending themselves against this kind of statement. Yeah, Israel's prison system has been so undercovered precisely because it's a perfect distillation of what Zionism is in practice. A state apparatus organized around domination, humiliation, dehumanization. Now that a mainstream media outlet has finally covered what's happening inside, Israel's defenders are understandably treating it as a grave threat. Yeah, because in a just world, it would be, right? In a just world, this would bring down the entire government because this is a moral stain on an entire country. Just as Guantanamo Bay was a moral stain on our entire country and what we've done and what we still continue to do there. I mean, this is a far more systematized version of ethnic domination, of course. than even Guantanamo Bay is. Do with that calculation what you will. I mean, this is not all that different to, as again, what the Nazis were doing. It's not. I don't know what else to say. What can you say, man? This is funny as well. Gottheimer tweeted an implication that New York Times is paid by Hamas, then tweeted the same thing a few hours later with that line removed, but both tweets are still up. It's almost as if the New York Times is on Hamas's payroll. Gottheimer, not even a week after he wrote an article in the same New York Times opinion editorial page about me being an anti-Semite, accuses the same newspaper about being on the payroll of Hamas. New York Times has been an unbelievably important tool in laundering the reputation of Israel as Israel waged a genocidal war. It conducted a genocide against the Palestinians. New York Times still to this day is rarely doing good journalism when it comes to issues that pertain to Palestinian existence. So of course, a lot of people are very frustrated with the New York Times. But having said that, it's a moment for critical support for Nicholas Kristof, at least.
Of detainees in Israeli prisons for years. And if they do make it out of detention, inmates come out looking like this. Israeli soldiers were even caught on camera gang raping and torturing a Palestinian prisoner in the notorious Detention detention facility.
Yep.
And while Ambassador Leiter claims that
Any complaint of unlawful conduct by Israeli authorities should be submitted to investigative bodies. And as is customary in a democratic society, those complaints will be reviewed thoroughly.
the soldiers from Israel's Unit 100 returned to reserve duty after charges against them were dropped. In fact, solidarity protests took place when the soldiers were detained for questioning. Meanwhile, the whistleblower who leaked the video was arrested, and no internal military investigation into the incident has been carried out. Instead, one of the soldiers, Meir bin Shitrit, has garnered a large online following.
ولدولة العرب إلى واحد بده يخط رجله هون بقول لكم من هون اليهودي ولا كتين ولا عكين ولا إشي جايز عليكم نووي من الصغير لكبير نحرقكم دولتكم ولا واحد ياخد القدس.
And made multiple appearances on primetime television where he is sometimes introduced as a hero.
Only democracy in the Middle East, by the way, guys. Israel is everything that we claim here in the United States of America random Muslim nations are. As a matter of fact, the closest comparison to the way Israel behaves with regular frequency is ISIS. Hamas is not in any way, shape, or form close to ISIS. Israel is. Hamas is actually in Gaza fighting against ISIS and ISIS affiliates. ISIS affiliates that are aligned with Israel. Dylan Byers, fair point on Nick Kristof discourse. Setting aside the debate over integrity reporting, if the claims in the piece are true, basic editorial judgment would result in follow-up stories on the New York Times' news side. Presumably those stories are in the work. If they're not, why not? Weird, why not? I can tell you why not. The reason why they're not doing it is because they're pro-Israel. But now they've been pushed into this position. There's no truth to this at all. Nicholas Kristof is a two-time Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist who's reported on sexual violence for decades and is widely regarded as one of the world's best on-the-ground reporters documenting and bearing witness to sexual abuse experienced by women and men in war and conflict zones. He traveled to the region to report firsthand on the stories of Palestinians who suffered abuse, and his article collects accounts on the victims' own words backed by independent studies. Rape has become a part of the Israeli national ethos. Politicians and government officials riot in support of it. Prominent journalists and commentators shout and scream in support of it in television programs. Public figures demand it, and comedians devote skits to the joys of raping Palestinian prisoners. It sounds like an insane anti-Semitic conspiracy, but it's straight up true. This is what Israel is. New York Times comms also says the Israeli Prime Minister has threatened to file a libel lawsuit against the New York Times regarding the Nicholas Kristof's deeply reported opinion column on sexual abuse by Israel's prison guards, soldiers, settlers, and interrogators. This threat, similar to one made last year, is a part of is a well-worn political playbook that aims to undermine independent reporting and stifle journalism that does not fit a specific narrative. Any such claim would be without merit. If you want to understand why there is a massive double standard, look at the lack of verifiable first-hand accounts that claimed, without any evidence, with tremendous amounts of retracted evidence, that Hamas engaged in directed systemic mass rape on October 7. Even second-hand accounts were later proven to be incorrect. That was in the paper record on the news side. This comes years after well-documented, direct, first-hand victim testimony. And the New York Times is still, they're defending Nicholas Kristof, but not writing a report on it, not following up on this article. That is because they are pro-Israel. Drop Site News asked AOC about Prime Minister Netanyahu threatening to sue the New York Times.